Welcome to another edition of NewsCap here on Daily World Television, where we provide a summary of some of the top stories around the world, as well as analysis and commentary. My name is Kal Korff, and I'm your host. Our top story for today is a profound discovery, a breakthrough, incredible milestone in the study of exoplanets. These are planets that exist outside our own solar system. As Daily World announced yesterday, the European Southern Observatory Organization, ESO, has made an official declaration or proclamation that they have discovered a planet which is similar to Earth that is orbiting our nearest stellar neighbor, Proxima Centauri. Now let me explain why this is important and put it in perspective for you. Our nearest star, of course, is called the Sun, or its name is Sol, S-O-L. It is about 92 to 93 million miles away. At the speed of light, light from the Sun takes about 8 minutes to reach planet Earth from the Sun at a speed of roughly 186,000 miles per second. 1 light year, which is the distance that light travels in a single year, is about 6 trillion miles. Proxima Centauri is the closest set of stars. It is part of a triple star system that is part of the Alpha Centauri group of stars. It consists of, again, 3 stars. Proxima Centauri is the smallest of the group. It is a red dwarf star, which is smaller than our Sun, and of course will last a lot longer. Eventually, Earth's Sun will explode in about 4 billion years, according to scientists. According to scientists, the Earth and the Sun are about 4.6 to 5 billion years old. Now, the significance of finding a planet similar to Earth orbiting Proxima Centauri is that it is close enough so that within a generation or two, maybe perhaps longer, we will actually be able to start sending space probes to that planet to find out what there is to discover. Let me explain how we do that. Current propulsion methods are simply too slow to make interstellar travel feasible. Let's use the example of Proxima Centauri. If a human being were capable of traveling at speeds near that of light, or even the speed of light, it would take about 4.2 years Earth time for that pilot to go one way to Proxima Centauri, and then another 4.2 Earth years to get back. However, this is where Einstein relativistic physics kick in, and things get a little bit crazy, or they're a bit of a mind bender, if you will. As Einstein proved, time is relative to the observer. It is a scientific fact, it actually has been measured, that astronauts orbiting the Earth and traveling at speeds of up to 25,000 miles an hour have actually stopped aging for small fractions of a second. In other words, the faster you travel, time slows down for the pilot. So while it might take 4.2 Earth years to get to Proxima Centauri and another 4.2 years to come back, the pilot, him or herself, would actually only age a few weeks. Now, this is possible when you travel at speeds near that of light. According to Einstein, you can never travel at the speed of light nor exceed it. Mass would become infinite at that point, and of course, your spaceship and yourself wouldn't stay together. But let's say that you could travel at even half the rate of the speed of light. That means you could send a probe to Proxima Centauri in roughly 8 years each direction, certainly a round trip within a human lifetime. Now, how would you do that? Well, scientists have also been able to prove in their experimental laboratories that if you make an antimatter engine propelled by hydrogen and anti-hydrogen atoms, you could actually reach speeds roughly half that of the speed of light after it would constantly accelerate for a period of time. How long that acceleration would be necessary would depend, of course, on the size of the engine and how much fuel was carried. In addition, atomic and subatomic particles that will be generated by creating and mixing matter with antimatter could be further directed via a simple nozzle to providing even more fuel and more thrust, thus increasing acceleration. Now, what all that fancy talk means is that prior to the discovery of this planet orbiting Proxima Centauri, the nearest planet that scientists think might be habitable or may even contain life was about 40 light years away. That would mean that it would take 40 years to get there Earth time if you were going at the speed of light, and another 40 years to get back. That's not practical in the lifespan of a human being to send a probe out that far, wait 40 years, and then hope it comes back 40 years later. Proxima Centauri is 10 times closer. There is now a planet that is about 1.3 times the mass of the Earth. It may or may not have an atmosphere that is breathable. They don't know yet. So be careful when the press tells you that it is a clone or a twin of Earth, because that has yet to be proven. The other interesting thing about this planet is because it is a lot closer to its sun. It is bombarded by X-rays at a rate that is roughly 400 times more powerful than the radiation that the sun receives. That isn't exactly an encouraging sign for life to develop as we know it, but we don't know everything. And the only way to find out what is going on this new planet that has been found, the good news of which is that it exists in the habitable zone, is to go ahead and send a space probe there as soon as we have developed the propulsion means to do it in an economic and practically logical and sensible and timely manner. Timely being qualified by the fact that it's still trillions of miles away. In other news today, the White House spokesman Josh Earnest is being, as usual, less than earnest when he has refused to give specifics and go into any really significant detail about what's going on in Turkey and the fact that its military using tanks has crossed the border into Syria. Now, this is where things get a bit complicated, and it's one of the reasons that Vice President Joe Biden recently went to Turkey to try to mend fences and try to rein in its elected dictator, Recep Tayyip Erdogan. Now, let me explain why this is a bit complicated and why the White House, understandably to a degree, but it doesn't totally excuse what the Obama administration is doing. Let's explain why it's a bit complicated and why things are less than clear, let's put it that way. First of all, let's look at what Josh Earnest said when reporters asked him about Turkish tanks crossing over into Syria's border. Notice that even though this is the White House press briefing room, it isn't even full. Go figure. Here's the tape.
Andrew, I'll give you the last one.
Thanks, Josh. Turkey has reported artillery strikes against Islamic State and Kurdish targets in northern Syria. First question on the strikes against the Islamic State group. Is Turkey going this alone? Were you told about it? Is it something that's part of a coordinated effort within Operation Inherent Resolve? And secondly, there have been strikes against the PYD, which is linked to a US-backed group. Does the White House have a problem with Turkey bombing your allies?
Well, Andrew, I can tell you that I don't have any specific military operations to talk to you about. Let me say it this way. I don't have any specific Turkish military operations to talk to you about. Our policy has been that we certainly stand with our allies, our NATO allies in Turkey, as they confront terrorism. And they face terrorism from a variety of sources, including most recently and tragically, just over the weekend, where there was a bombing at a wedding, of all places, where dozens of innocent people were killed. So the threat that Turkey faces from extremism and from terrorists is very real. And there are a variety of steps the United States has taken to support our Turkish allies, and we've certainly offered additional support as they deal with specific incidents like the attack that we saw over the weekend. And that will be part of the message that Vice President Biden will convey when he travels to Turkey later this week.
Well, the Vice President also warned Turkey to stop hitting U.S. allies.
Well, again, there are no details of Turkish military operations that I'm going to talk about from here. Obviously, there are concerns that the Turks have raised about Kurdish activities, and we've discussed the way in which the United States and other members of our counter-ISIL coalition have been able to work effectively with the Syrian Arab coalition against ISIL elements inside of Syria. So this is another extraordinarily complex situation, but we've made clear that everyone who's involved, including Turkey, should make going after ISIL the top priority. And Turkey, to their credit, has made clear their commitment to doing that in a variety of ways, including giving the United States and our coalition partners access to certain military facilities inside of Turkey that allow us to take strikes efficiently against ISIL targets. So, we've made that case directly to the Turks on a variety of occasions, and we're certainly going to continue to do that, even as we're mindful of the terror risk that for Turkey that emanates from other places too.
Okay, final question. The Turks are reportedly moving armaments and tanks towards the border. Does the White House think that a Turkish incursion in northern Syria would be useful?
Well, again, I'm not going to talk about any Turkish military movements. We've made clear all along that one of our priorities has been getting the Turks to make more consistent progress in securing the Turkey-Syria border. And they've made a lot of progress on that front over the last 6 or 9 months, and we've been gratified to see that. But there certainly is more that they could do, and we would welcome them doing that. But Turkey is a NATO ally and making a valuable contribution to our counter-ISIL coalition. And we're going to continue to coordinate with them closely as they do that, and will certainly be an important part of Vice President Biden's visit to that country later this week. Okay. Thanks a lot, everybody.
As is obvious in viewing the tape, Josh Earnest refused to answer some basic questions, so let me fill in the blanks for you based on what is known and what is public information. Now, the situation in Turkey is very complicated because Turkey, on paper, in theory, I stress that, in theory, is a secular democracy. Yet ever since its elected dictator, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, has been in power, he has systematically moved to eliminate his opponents through various means. He has recently used the coup that was attempted against him as an excuse to clamp down on all opposition, real or imagined. He has prosecuted the press. He has censored free speech. He has even told women to mind or know their place, quote unquote, because he's sexist. And Erdogan is an Islamist at heart, a conservative Islamist, and Turkey is increasingly becoming an Islamist state, much to the chagrin and alarm of NATO, the United States, and of course the European Union, which it seeks to join. Turkey has always wanted to join the EU, not because it agrees with Western liberal thinking nor secularism. It wants to join the EU because it'll get a lot of free money, plus because the parliament system in the EU is roughly what we call representative. The greater the population of a member country, the greater the number of representatives in the EU Parliament that nation would have. In the case of Turkey, whose population is roughly on par with its largest member, Germany, this would actually give Turkey the majority of seats in the EU Parliament. And of course, what better way to control Europe than to be invited to join it, to become a member of the EU, have the greatest number of politicians in the Parliament, and who can stop you, right? It would be kind of hard to do. Or you could at least be a kingmaker or a deal breaker, and that would suit Turkey just fine, because Turkey at heart longs to go back to the days when it was a world oppressor and ran what was then called the Ottoman Empire. And to put it blunt, the Ottoman Empire were not nice guys. So, what's happened in the war against the Islamic State terrorist group is that President Obama has put together a coalition of what he says are more than 50 nations, now 60 if you believe the White House, that are all supposedly aligned to various degrees to stop the Islamic State from taking over the world. The problem is the war has not gone the way that Obama has hoped in the time frame that he originally promised or intimated. In fact, the war has dragged on the entire time he has been president, which is nearly 8 years now. In fact, it was Obama and then Secretary of State Hillary Clinton who got the bright idea to interfere in Syria and to topple its brutal dictator, Bashar Assad. Now, the reason they did this is not because they really care about the plight of the Syrian people. They don't, and the United States historically never has. Obama pretends to care, so does Hillary, but that's just to justify the real motives for trying to depose Assad. The real motives for the White House trying to do this and having cooked up this scheme is that they made a point to align with the Saudis, who are, of course, the ideological and geopolitical rivals and enemies of the Assad regime in Syria. This is because the Assads are Alawites, which is a branch of Shia Islam. Now, what country happens to be the world capital of Shiaism? It is Iran, of course. And Iran and Saudi Arabia are bitter political and religious and geopolitical and regional rivals. These countries hate each other. And each of these two countries is trying to spread its influence around the Middle East and the rest of the world. Saudi Arabia, for example, has bankrolled the funding of more mosques, cranking out more radical Islamic nuts and jihadi types than any other country on the planet. Iran has continued to further its hegemony throughout the Middle East and what it calls the Persian Gulf, while the Saudis call it the Arabian Gulf. And while the Saudis don't openly proclaim nor shout slogans like "Death to America" or "Death to Israel," many members of its royal family and the rich petroleum elite there absolutely want Israel destroyed, and of course they don't like the West and its liberal values. To them, their idea of paradise is keeping women oppressed, refusing to let them drive, forcing them to cover themselves, and of course murdering homosexuals. Now, that may seem kind of cruel, but that is exactly how Saudi society is. Iran is no better. If you don't cover yourself and you're a woman, you can be beaten, imprisoned, or raped, all legally, just like in Saudi Arabia. And, of course, the Iranians have chanted "Death to America" and "Death to Israel." They even have a holiday celebrating what they call Jerusalem Day, which is when Jerusalem is, quote, liberated, unquote, by Muslims and all the Jews are exterminated. So, you have two radical regimes, both of which support terrorism. The Saudis are officially aligned with the United States only because it's convenient for them. They'd rather prefer America than Russia. And Russia, of course, is aligned with Iran, and Iran supports Syria. So the reason that Barack Obama and former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton went ahead and messed in the affairs of Syria, trying to depose its dictator Assad, is because they wanted to overthrow his government in the run-up to the nuclear negotiations with Iran, because if Syria does fall, which means Assad falls, then Iran is permanently weakened, and they would be easier to bargain with in the nuclear deal. Now, what happened is that the Obama administration then started funding radical, militant jihadi types, including members of Al-Qaeda, who promised to stop targeting the U.S. and would switch their focus to toppling Assad. The CIA worked with the Saudis and the Turks to go ahead and oust Assad. It didn't work. And because the war has dragged on, Russia has now jumped into the war. And one of the reasons that there have been a lot of victories in the last 6 months is because Russia has stepped up and has gotten completely involved. And the Russians, unlike the Obama administration, when they fight a war, they're really serious. Now, to complicate matters, Russia has also been killing and bombing US-backed rebels because they don't recognize their legitimacy. They also are on the side of Iran, and they don't want to see US influence nor Saudi influence spread into the region. Another issue that has happened is Turkey. Turkey likes to play both sides of the fence. While it cries and screams that it is a victim of terrorism, and yes it is, part of the reason that Turkey is a victim of terrorism is because of Turkey's behavior. Now, in the middle of all this are the Kurds. The Kurds want their own independence. They want a country called Kurdistan. If Kurdistan were ever to come into being, depending on where the boundaries are drawn, it would consist of land that is presently owned by the Turks. It would consist of land from Iran, land from Iraq, and parts of Syria. This is why those four countries don't want to see Kurdistan exist, while nations like Israel support the existence and the rise of an independent and truly free Kurdistan. The Kurds, however, are the best group of fighters on the ground, and their victories have rewarded them by seizing territory, and Turkey fears this. In fact, Turkey considers the Kurds to be a greater threat to its existence than the Islamic State terrorist group is. So what Turkey has been doing is systematically slaughtering and killing and committing mass murder against the Kurds. They have used their military to wipe out thousands of them, actually. And while the Obama administration says, don't do that, that's not nice, Turkey doesn't care, Obama doesn't care, and the massacres continue. So the only reason, folks, that Turkish tanks have rolled across Syria into across its borders now is because they want to go ahead and choke off one of the last remaining key strategic points and crossing points that the Islamic State has in its territory. That's a commendable, logical objective. If you can set up a strangle point or cut off key shipping routes or areas of your enemy, you do that. But there's also an ulterior motive. In exchange for the promise by these Kurdish groups not to stay there but to go back across the border and to give up the land that they have conquered, the Kurds are helping the U.S. The U.S. has assured Turkey that they will fly straight and behave okay. And because Turkey believes the United States and is free to wipe them out should they break the deal, Turkey has agreed to play nice for now. And what's happening is that Vice President Joe Biden went to Turkey to not only soothe relations, but to send a strong message to Turkey's government that we're with you, but not on everything.
We have made it absolutely clear to the elements that were part of the Syrian Democratic Forces, the YPG that participated, that they must move back across the river. They cannot, will not, and under no circumstances get American support if they do not keep that commitment, period.
For example, as the Vice President makes it clear, the United States has received a formal extradition request from Turkey to go ahead and extradite one of Erdogan's key opponents. And the United States has told Erdogan that the President of the United States cannot personally do it, he could be impeached for that, and that if there's going to be an extradition at all, evidence must be supplied and a U.S. court must make that decision. So this is what's going on now. It's a very complicated geopolitical and just general politics mess. There are human lives at stake, of course, and especially innocent people on the ground. And it seems that all sides don't really care about the innocent civilians caught up in the middle of this war. Now, Syria's dictator Assad is, of course, upset, understandably so. This is not to say that anyone sympathizes with him, that now his country has been invaded by Turkey. How far Turkey will go, nobody knows. Assad doesn't seem to know. Suspiciously quiet on all this is Russia. What has Russia's reaction been? Well, publicly there's been nothing so far, but it would be a stretch of credibility it would be credulous, in fact, to think that Russia was not consulted ahead of time and told that this is only going to be a very limited operation, and that once the Islamic State is ousted from this last stronghold that they have, that the Kurds will go back and play nice and go back to their territory and give up what they have seized, and Turkey will then command its tanks to return back across the border and return home. We will see if this really happens.